In this video, I'll look at getting some different materials on my plants here. As you can see, I've used the object paint on all three different types of plants. The large lilies, the small banana plants we'll call them, and the flowers. And I've painted them all over, so I've got quite a dense jungle going. Right now, these have a temporary material on them, and I'd like to get some more varied materials on each piece. I'll press M for my material editor. And this is going to pull up the Slate material editor, which is a node-based material editor in 3ds Max. There's two modes for materials, the Slate and the Compact, and we can switch by choosing modes and Slate or Compact. The Compact, for example, has sample spheres and attributes or properties for one material at a time, depending on what you click on. The Slate, then, gives you a node-based material editor. For example, I'll double-click on Leaves Layout. It's the material that's on everything in my scene, and there's that material. Double-clicking on the material shows me its properties on the right, much like the Compact. However, this lets me, in a node-based fashion, connect maps to multiple slots, or see all of my materials laid out, and see how their pieces are connected. For example, if I wanted to connect Map 1, bitmap, which is the color of the flowers, to something else, say the specular color, the shine of that material, I can simply drag it across, and it's connected. I'll double-click on the sample sphere to make it bigger. And if I don't want to see the full bar graph here, I can press H to hide it, and it just shows the connected nodes. I can also connect things over here on the right. The M stands for map. What I'd like to do is get some different materials established for the different plants, reusing this texture. And this is a workflow we'll use in a game a lot, where we see one texture, or one image that's part of a material, that works for many different objects in many different ways, although the objects themselves have different ways of shading regarding the light. What I'll do here is make some new materials, and get their shine set, and then connect that map to it. First, I'll turn on Mental Ray as my rendering engine, as we're going to use the Mental Ray daylight system later. I'll press F10 for the render setup. And down at the bottom of the common parameters, where we define the image size we're rendering, I'll go to Assign Renderer. And instead of Default Scanline Renderer, I'll click on the Choose Renderer button and choose NVIDIA Mental Ray. I'll click OK. And now the tabs up at the top change. I'll close this Render Setup dialog, and over on the left side under Material Map Browser, I have not only standard, but Mental Ray materials available. Here's the difference. Standard 3ds Max materials approximate the way real-world materials shade. For example, this Leaves Layout standard material is a blend shader, which gives you a smooth surface with a round highlight, and was originally developed for metals. That way we can lower the amount of general color, the diffuse color, and get a metallic surface. Our other materials are fairly straightforward. There's an architectural for architectural pieces. For example, we've got things like metals, masonry, and so forth. And I used to use this quite some time back. It was very useful. We also have things like a shell, two materials one over the other, or a shellac, which was originally developed for car paint. Now though, I'm going to use Mental Ray materials, as these give me a more realistic render overall. Under Mental Ray, we can see we have an Autodesk material library of common building materials. We've also got an Arc and Design material, which is a versatile utility material. That is, it can be multiple materials, depending on how we configure it. We have Car Paint and Subsurface Scatter. A subsurface scatter is terrific. Although it looks sort of like skin initially, we can make things like translucent plants out of it. What I'll do first is to get a material established for my dirt. I'll double-click on Arc and Design, and double-click on the sample sphere for that material. This material, material number 3, will be dirt, and so I'll double-click on it to make sure I'm editing those properties, and name it first. I'll call it dirt. I'm going to say in my jungle that I've got a deep red-brown dirt. First, in a material, what we want to think about is the main color and the reflectivity, if there is any. I'll click on the color swatch and choose a color here. I'll bring up saturation, bring up green a little bit to make a more reddish rust color, and bring down value. There's my rich red dirt on my jungle floor. I'll click OK, and then I'll take reflectivity and glossiness down. Right now, as we can see, it's very shiny. And in a material, if you click on the Show Background and Preview button, it'll display checkers in the background, which show us how reflective that material is. I'm going to right-click on the spinners here for reflectivity to zero them out, so it's a completely matte surface. The other neat thing with the Arkin design is that there's a roughness component. And what this lets us do, as the tooltip says, is create a powdery surface. The roughness scatters the light across that surface. I'll crank up this roughness to roughly halfway, give or take. Now I've got a good, rich red, rough dirt to put on my ground. To assign it then, I'll select it and click on the Assign Material to Selection button. My dirt goes red-brown, and I know the material is assigned. What I can do then in Setup is to get other materials made, and what I like to do in Workflow is to get my material palette arranged here so I can see the materials and their colors next to each other to make sure the design is working overall. I'm going to delete this architectural material I had made, as I don't need it, by selecting it and pressing Delete. Now I'm going to make some other materials. I'll make one for the lilies, and one for the banana leaves, and also one for the flowers. For the lilies, as their leaves are fairly thick, I'm going to use a subsurface scattering fast material. I'll double click on it, and there's my material. It comes with an additional bump node here, which we can use if we'd like to put additional surface detail in. I'll double click on that material, and there's my subsurface scatter. The idea in a subsurface scatter material is that it's either skin, like we're wearing, we could say, or things that scatter light through their surface. For example, wax, thick plants, jade, soap, milk, maybe some leathers, depending on how thick they are. They scatter light within their volume, but the light doesn't exit as it does through glass. So it's a subsurface scatter. Light is scattering under the surface. What I'll do with this material first is name it. It's a good habit to get into, naming your materials, and I'll call this one lilies. I'll make my other materials and assign them, and then get some textures on in the next video. To copy a material, I'll select the lilies and hold Shift and drag. It makes a new material, and I can disconnect the bump if I need by just pulling that node off. I'll double click on this new material and name this one banana. And finally, I'll clone this once more and call it flowers. For now, I'm just going to assign a color to the material, and this will help me identify where it's placed. For the flowers, I'll go into the overall diffuse color, the main color of the material overall, and put in, let's say, pink. I'll pick the lilies, double click on them, and in the overall coloration, put green in. And for the bananas, I'll double click on them and put in a yellow. Now we can change these colors, but these will help me identify where these materials are placed in the scene. We have so many objects in here that picking them one at a time could be very slow. I'll use my Select by Name dialog by pressing H, clicking on the main view, and here's Select from Scene. What I'll do here is, for example, pick all of my lily objects, picking one, holding Shift and picking the end, and clicking OK. Now I'll pick this lilies material and click on the Assign Material to Selection button. The lilies flash white for a second and show up just plain white. Even though we put the green in, that color is not in all the places to show up correctly. However, we can identify it if we need to. I'll do the same with the flowers, pressing H for Select by Name, scrolling up and selecting my flowers. With all the flowers selected, I'll click OK and assign this flower material. Now I'll do the same with the bananas. We can even get in here and filter if we'd like. Up at the top, when we press in the Find column, let's say Plant, it highlights everything with plant. I'll put in space and B, and now it's all of my bananas selected. I'll select the banana material and assign it. With the materials assigned, I'm ready to get in and put a texture in, an image that's part of a material. But I've got these materials set up so that the jungle has a soft glow when we stand under or near plants and the light comes through them a bit.